Hello there. It's the chairman of the United States Department of Nerds, where we are for the people, by the people, and of the people. And today is Free Comic Book Day. But before y'all rush out that door, I have Ben Lacy of Biting Comics here with me to discuss his upcoming Kickstarter, Samson Issue number 2.
You are listening to the USDN on the DSPN.
It's a trap!
All right, sorry about that. My computer started looping itself on the share there. But all right, everybody, welcome Ben
Hello, how are
into
you?
the USDN podcast. He doesn't know it yet, but by coming on the podcast, he is now an honorary council member of the United States Department of Nerds. It's just a perk that comes with coming on the podcast, Ben.
Awesome.
But let's jump into it.
Great.
Ben, how did you get into comic books, and what made you decide to hey, I think I'm going to do a comic book today?
I guess I'd been, I casually, write stories every now and then, prose stories, fantasy, sci-fi, and things like that. And I'd always wanted to do a comic book. And I'd come up with the comic book we're going to talk about today, Samson. That was actually my first big idea, but it had been sitting around for 20 or 30 years. But I had another idea more recently called about a shark. The Meg movie had come out, not long before. And, I thought to myself, it's just another shark movie where the monster shark goes and tries to kill people and they have to kill the shark. And I was like, what if he did something different? So I had this idea where the shark is the good guy. He's a modified cyborg military experiment. So he's actually has heightened intelligence and can fly short distances. And that's where I came up with the idea of Shark of War. And at first I was thinking it, maybe writing it as a short story. But I said, if I wanted to do a comic book that was different, that would be a pretty good comic book.
That would be definitely different.
It'd be different. And, I'm not a great artist and I didn't know any artists. So I was going to do the art myself. And I knew enough computer graphics to do art that way. And it worked out pretty well for that. So my first comic book was Shark of War, which you can kind of see on the wall behind me here, some issues of that. And I've done now 8 issues of Shark of War. I funded it on Kickstarter, I've done a couple other comic books, Vicious Vixens and the Cthulhu Man as well. But I'd always came back to this idea of Samson that I'd had, as a Jewish person, not a lot of Jewish superheroes, even though, a lot of the creators were Jewish. I always thought, this idea I had it for Samson, I thought I really liked it and I wanted to do it. And now that I was more integrated into, crowdfunding comic books, I knew artists and stuff like that and how to print and publish the comic book. I was like, maybe this is the time to do Samson. So
no, I really like it. You sent me over the first one to read, and the mixture of reality inside of that book, and you actually showing us who these characters are actually based off of, really hit that book home. But we'll get into that. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here on that one, but I will say issue 1 was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
It was like I don't know if you've seen the review I did on it. I gave you
I
the
have
review.
not. I'd love to see the review. Actually,
I
can
it's,
always.
it's up on Blue
I
Sky.
could always use some good pull lines for my Kickstarter for people.
The whole blurb I gave you on Blue Sky is perfect for that. I intentionally write smaller reviews like that so you can copy and paste them over to Kickstarter as a review.
Right.
And it's just something that the very first one I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, hey, here's a blurb I wrote for Blue Sky because I'm only allowed so many characters.
Yeah.
And the guy who I wrote it for was like, oh, dude, that's perfect. I can just copy and paste the whole thing and use it on Kickstarter. I'm like, perfect, cool. Because I try to keep those short and sweet, but I do usually go back and write an article as well on it, on the interview and on the book itself. And I post that up to the our DFPM website, which I can send you a link when I get done writing that. But normally I do the interview. I've read the book. I kind of take the two, smash them together, and I do a quick little article on it. And I keep it short and sweet. It's like 2 or 3 paragraphs about the artist, the book, what I thought about it, and then I'll post it to the website. But I try to give as much as I can back to the person for coming on the podcast.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate it. It's really hard to get reviews of from media on on indie comic books, and I think it really helps establish credibility,
which is crazy to me.
So many of these out there.
I'm an indie guy. I love indie books. Like you see, this is new comic book day for this week that I haven't recorded yet.
Yeah,
I'm always late on getting stuff recorded, but this week was a hell of a week, but that's going to get recorded today. And of that pile, there's probably 3 comic books in there from Marvel and DC. Everything else is Image, Dark Horse, and everybody else. Everybody that everybody considers indie. Yeah. Even though I'm like, Image is like probably the second largest producer of comic books. I wouldn't call it
Image. Most people working at Image are not indie. I mean, it's like, Todd McFarlane, those guys, and.
Man, I mean, I remember what was it, 92 or 93 when Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane started Image Comics, and they're like, oh, this indie company, and I'm like, and all of a sudden this indie company was like,
they were
booming,
selling a million copy issues,
Young Blood,
for 1 million copies at the time. They were setting records for print runs that were like 10 times what a comic book today would come close to, even probably more than even something like Absolute Batman is sold nowadays. I
think Absolute Batman just broke that record, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think issue 1 did just break the record.
Okay.
If it didn't break the record, it's pretty darn close to breaking the record.
That's pretty good for that. I mean, especially nowadays when a lot of comic books sell 20,000 issues, even at Marvel or DC, probably. Yeah, when I was in the we're probably the similar era in the 70s, I would Marvel Comics used to have to print these statements on how much their monthly publishing numbers every now and then. If you the old comics, you'd see like this print, and every now and then I'd look at it, and Spider-Man would have like 500,000 copies a month printed out on average or something, and lesser comic books might have 200,000 or something, but I doubt most comic books come anywhere close to that today. Even
they really don't. And then what I appreciate nowadays is they do keep the runs smaller, which also adds to the rarity of the book, and which helps the industry a lot by keeping low print, more value later.
Yeah. I mean, back at that time, I thought of indie comics as Eclipse. I don't know if you remember Eclipse.
I don't.
They mainly did their big claim to fame was probably that they were the U.S. publishers for Miracle Man at the time.
Okay, yeah, I didn't remember Miracle Man.
And then Comico, which I like because they did Elementals and Justice Machine. Elementals was Bill Willingham before he did Fables and stuff like that. So those were what I thought.
Underrated book if you can find it.
What, Fables?
Yeah.
Yeah. Elementals was pretty good too. I like that. That it was a, if you like a, a superhero team where the team is, very strange, and they're kind of, it's kind of all tried to be more real world too. They weren't weekly fighting super villains. It had some real world realism, and the characters were kind of like not all that nice people, but they weren't bad guys. They just weren't, they just weren't Superman type archetypes. They were.
Well, I've always enjoyed those characters more though.
Yeah,
and that's why I like the indie so much. Indie comics, you get more freedom of what you want to do. So that's why I've always found myself more intrigued by those types of characters and more of the indie type of books. But so let's jump into, tell us about Samson. That's kind of a loaded title because it does have biblical references to it. But what is Samson exactly?
Yeah, Samson. The name for the character is going to come more from the fact that they set him up to be a superhero to represent Jewish people, and it's at this point in the story, it goes from, the story kind of is an epic, going from World War II when he's created as a child to the end of the Cold War. In World War II, the Nazis were experimenting on young children. This is true. This part is true. The Nazis experimented on young children with an emphasis on twins. So he and his brother, who is his twin, wind up in Auschwitz. They are Ukrainian, Polish Jews, much like my own ancestry. And his first name happens to be Samuel. So obviously the idea of being called Samson would make a lot of sense. But he and his brother are taken to this camp, and there are two scientists there who start experimenting on them as a prototype effort to try and they want to test these drugs they have to give you superpowers, which they're eventually going to try and create a line of Nazi super soldiers. So that's what's going on in World War II. Meantime, in the fall of the Berlin Wall, the adult Samson learns that there may be one of these Nazi super soldiers who survived the war, and he may have escaped to the United States. Also, something which has happened. Nazis famously, some of them escaped to Argentina. A few of them actually escaped and hid out in the United States, and were eventually found and brought to Israel for trial. So the first issue focuses on the Nazis experimenting on him as a young child, and him trying to hunt down this possible Nazi super criminal and bring him back to justice. So that's where we go for what that covers most of the first issue. And the second issue, which I think will really gets into the heart of the story, he has to return to Israel, and we actually see the efforts to give him superpowers as a child kick into high gear. If you saw the cliffhanger ending at the end of issue, the Nazis are frustrated in that they haven't seen the results they've hoped for, and they're hoping to kick things into higher gear with a more sharp effort to give him superpowers. Of course, it's not going to go quite, the way they hope it does.
Yeah.
That's why the title of the story is "Escape from Auschwitz," because he's going to try and finally get free.
Yeah. No, that was a really cool cliffhanger at the end of issue 1.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it was one of those where I'm like, this can't. Like, I obviously I knew you had issue 2 coming out, but the way that one ended, I was like, man, I'm like, issue 2 is either going to start off with a big bang, or we're going to get a big bang at the middle of the book. I'm like, we're going to get a good issue 2 out of this. I know that.
Oh yeah, you're going to get a payoff on that story. Though there's the other story, the like I said, it extends through many years. You're going to get to find out what happened to his brother. We're going to get to meet what happened. See what's happened to him in Israel, because at some point he does wind up in Israel, which is where he got his uniform and his name, because the Israelis government at the time of independence wanted somebody to symbolize what they were themselves. so if you looked at the digital back of the book stuff, there's
Yeah.
some stories on.
No, I did
look.
see the concept of art that you sent over as well when you were picking out the his super suit and everything. I thought those were really cool. I thought you made the good choice on that one.
Yeah, actually, my audience preferred that one. I might have gone a different way from them. So I put it up for a vote
like
for
that
my
one.
readership. You know, I was like, these are the 3 choices. What do you like? And they like that one, and I'm like, okay, we're going with you because
Yeah, I mean, they're the
sense
ones
of
who are buying
style
it.
is me.
So yeah, but no, I really. So actually, we already talked about the character. So you did say that because his brother did disappear. I think probably about 3/4 of the way through the book, or
Oh,
halfway
he's
through the
still
book.
there. You know, they you know, they originally experiment on him, and it doesn't go the way nothing happens, and then they switch. They change what their medicines, their drugs, and starts experimenting on Sam, and you know, and the brother basically, you know, is still there, but he, you know, we don't.
No, there's a time jump in there.
We're going to see that the drugs have had an effect on him too, and we'll see what happens to him.
Okay. Something to look forward to in issue 2, and give those readers like, oh, you want to come back for issue 2.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think issue 2, and then issue 3, I think is going to be, you know, I wish I could get these out every 2 or 3 months, you know, obviously, but as an indie comic guy doing it all yourself, you're kind of, you know. If I was doing this for a publisher, you know, and all I had to worry about is writing the story and checking the art, I could probably do it at, you know, get it out like almost like a regular, you know, Marvel book, but hey, I can't.
Yeah, that would be sort of buying your own publishing company.
Yeah, the logistics are very hard, you know, getting things moving.
All right. So tell us about how your creative process works for this. Did you storyboard like the entire series out, or are you just kind of like, all right, here's issue 1, here's issue 2. Now let me start brainstorming issue 3, or do you already have your whole storyboarded out, written out on a notepad somewhere going, okay, now we're here, now we're here?
I kind of have you know, a rough synopsis of the first 4 or 5 issues, and then in my head I probably have, you know, the first 7 or 8 actually issues, you know, and then what I normally prefer to do is I have an idea of it, and then I just start, you know, I have an idea of what I want this issue to cover, and then I start writing the comic script and try to see how it lays out on the page for me, page by page. I usually write page by page, panel by panel, so I kind of give the artist, you know, I see this page is having 6 panels. Here's panel 1. I see in panel 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I kind of write it out. And, you know, usually I follow what my original idea is, but then I sometimes have, while I'm writing it, also, you know, maybe this would be better or this would be better, and the ideas kind of go. And, you know, as I think about it on each page by page, I can try to imagine, you know, how big the panel might be, whether I'm trying to cram. I have a tendency to try and cram a lot into a page. So there are panels where I've gone 6, 7, 8 panels a page. You know, and that's a lot
of panels when you look at it, because the average is 6 is usually that good number for panels on a page, unless it's a small panel depicting like a POW or a Zap or something.
Yeah, well, part of the reason I do that is practical, because you know, I try to do a 24-page book, and I want to cover certain things in 24 pages. So if I can't do that, I start upping the count a bit, and then you know, because if I can't do it in 24 pages, I have to go to 28 pages, which obviously starts to increase the expense.
The price,
there's a practical, you know, again, as a, you know, indie comic thing, there's a practical limit. If I was funding, you know, at $100,000 an issue, or, you know, well, even $20,000 an issue, I'd be like, yeah, let's make this a 28-page book. I'll have a couple more big splash pages. I always have a couple splash pages in the book, no matter what. So I'm always planning to have 1 or 2 big full pages as well. So you get that big artistic moment, which we're going to see in the fight with Uber Kong in the in issue 2.
Yeah, I did
get a
see the
really
concept
good,
for that. That
you know,
concept was really dope. Yeah.
you really get a good picture. And I think I sent you one of the this was just, I mean, it gives you an idea, but there was a
You
picture
did.
of the fight with where he was drawn, where my artist Nico Turan was drawing it, and you can kind of see what's coming.
That was one of those where I was like, do I want to show these? And I kind of do, and I kind of was like, no, I kind of want to steer people to the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
To I will say this: there is a fight with a giant enhanced gorilla, which is, one of those things where you look at it, like I've seen the concept art for it. It's really dope. And then all of a sudden in real life, people are talking about, could 100 dudes fight a gorilla all of a sudden? And I'm like, oh, I've seen concept art for this for a comic book.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be some of that as well, because things on that fight don't go totally the way you might think they would. Let's just say that you should have some sympathy for the gorilla in the storyline too.
Oh yeah, most definitely, most definitely.
But yeah. So that fight's gonna be exciting, hopefully. And I think the other part of the story is also inspired by real events. Is what happens between him and the Nazi super criminal he finds.
Let's bring this up, and we can see that right there.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was on the splash page, but
yeah,
right
well, they let you add more art nowadays. So to your preview page, you used to only just be able to show like one image. So what you're seeing there at the top is some of the like I said, the story concerns the after the fall of the Berlin Wall. More information about these super soldier projects from World War II is being found. And there's an effort by somebody to start creating more super soldiers. And you're seeing in the top panel there the effort, some of the results of that effort. And some of the super creations are rather freakish there. You've got the guy on the left has got your obvious super strength, but the one guy is which I've called elasticide. Is basically has like Mr. Fantastic type powers. And then there's a woman called Sprite who's hanging on him on the right, who kind of has your Wolverine, feral powers, as you might call it, who I've dubbed Spite. And then below you see a little bit of the Uber Kong fight with our young Sam, who like I said, during World War II is a child. That image there is cover art for issue 1, which will be available to that cover is available as part of the issue 2 Kickstarter.
Okay.
For issue 1 Kickstarter covers, I did several different variants, and this is actually an artist whose parents survived Auschwitz, and she specializes in Holocaust art. And this is an oil painting that I licensed from her to use as a cover. So she sells, oil paintings for private collectors and also for galleries and museums. And she let me license this image to use as a cover. And of course, it works really well because it's two brothers in Auschwitz, and it's inspired by some famous photos of children at Auschwitz, where you see the photos of them behind the barbed wire.
And it really sends a message to you in that painting too.
This cover is done by current artist Nico Turan, who's going to be the issue 2 interior artist as well. He also does Vicious Vixens for me, which is one of my other comic books. But this obviously is inspired by one of the Alex Ross Superman covers.
Yeah, I have that cover somewhere.
Oh,
it's one of my favorite Superman.
Yeah, I like that, Alex. I said, you think you can do something with that photorealistic style? And he said, I'll try. And I think he really hit it out of the park. It's not a direct copy, but it's still got that photorealistic look. This is also probably my most controversial cover because of current political issues
Yeah.
vis-a-vis, Israel and things like that. So when I published it, put this on Facebook, there was some backlash to it, but I was
I'm
like,
sure.
oh
I'm
well.
sure.
And then you get an article on the real life villains. Both the scientists who are experimenting on him are based on actual Nazi scientists who experimented on people in concentration camps. The first one there, he actually was found guilty at the Nuremberg trials, and he was sent he was executed. The second one was not. He went to prison for a while. He got his license back. He lived till be 90.
That's crazy.
Kind of a very life is unfair kind of thing.
Yeah, no kidding.
There was no the justice for him was not what it should have been. But yeah, and then you can see that
I do like this picture because the way they portray the artist and you decided to portray these two doctors or these two people doing the experimentations, like how you can like the pictures look like them or resemble them to some degree. I thought that was like perfect for the story and kind of really hit this home that you are basing this off of real people who did evil things.
Yeah, they also, if you look at them, they also, the pictures, they also have a very evil, kind of creepy look in their real pictures.
They do.
Mengele is obviously Joseph Mengele is obviously the most famous of these scientists, since he was at Auschwitz and was deciding who lived and who died as people got off the trains. But he's kind of like, blandly handsome, whereas, these guys they look the part of, of villains. If you saw them, you would be like, oh man, these guys are scary.
That's one of those where you go like, who hurt them as a child to make them this way? All right. We'll stop sharing this. No, that's to me, that was once I seen that part of the splash page, I was like, oh damn, this really, for me, it really hit it home on like, you're telling a fictional story, but you have some historical facts mixed into it as well. And I've always appreciated that. And from a storytelling perspective, when you can, I'm telling you a nonfiction or fictional story, but I'm also going to mix it in with some nonfiction as well and historical facts to back some of what I'm saying up.
Well, that was important to me. I mean, there's this is obviously not a true story, but there's most of the people who were directly involved in this are dead, and the only ones that are left were probably young, very young at the time, and there's obviously a group of what they call Holocaust deniers and stuff like that who are out there. So I wanted to have the actual reality there as well, because a lot of people, they aren't going to watch documentaries about the Holocaust, but they consume pop culture stuff, and they would they see about it through mediums like this.
I seen my very first one on YouTube actually, and it was about the guy who saved all the children during the Holocaust. I think he saved like 800 kids or something like that.
Is that the one in Belgium or Denmark or somebody?
Yeah. And like he's in the audience and they're talking about the Holocaust and all the survivors, and then they recognize him. So he stands up and everybody's clapping. Yeah. And he's like, and the host is like, hey, I want to introduce you to some of the people that you saved. And the entire audience like stood up, and the emotion that man felt, like that one hits you. Like that one hits you in the feels hard.
Wow.
And I was like, somebody's cutting onions,
Yeah.
Because it does. I don't care what kind of human being you are. You see something emotionally charged like that, it's going to hit you as well.
Right.
And that one definitely hit me, and definitely really hit it home that this is a very real thing, and a very real thing that happened and was caused by really evil people. But Ben, tell us about your Kickstarter campaign and what people can expect from your campaign.
Okay, so we're going to have like I said, I'm hoping to launch probably in a week and a half to 2 weeks, depending. You know, I want to make sure the art. You know, I need at least need to have the covers ready. We're gonna have at least three covers, and I think they're going to be very cool. So people are going to have several cover options. The campaign, you know, I always do, you know, a very low cost tier, a digital tier for $5, you know, and then I try to keep my base books as reasonably priced as possible, you know, given that, you know, I'm printing them and having to ship them individually. So I think my prices on the Kickstarter side are relatively low, but the big thing is you can read the digital issue of the first issue on the Kickstarter page. It will be there at the very top. You can read issue 1 for free and see if you like it.
I will tell everybody, read that. And then as soon as it goes live, and Ben, if you will send me a notification, I will post that notification across my social media platforms as well. And I encourage everybody who is going to listen to this later. This will go live next Wednesday, as that's my day. I kind of push out all my products to the World Wide Webs through my and read that first issue when it comes out. I thought it was really good. It was one of those where you get to see kind of firsthand some of the evil that was done to these people, and the product that it produced is now like their greatest enemy. And I thought that was it's a really, really cool concept to put into comic book format. It does tell a good story. So when it comes out live, I'll post it. I encourage everybody to read that first issue and then support the second issue, because it's a good story.
Yeah, I always try to give out a lot of my first issues free, because I have some faith in my work, and I'm hoping that if people read it, they'll be inspired to want to back the project. So yeah, so it, you know, and you won't have to sign up for anything or anything like that. You just click the link and it'll pop up in Google Docs, you know, and you can read it and download it and share it if you want. I don't really mind people sharing my digital copies all over the place if they want. But yeah, so I'm hopeful that, you know, that will bring a lot of people in, and that they'll at least back at some level. So yeah, issue 3 is going to have some cool stuff. We're going to get to meet some of the extended Samson family, including the Omega Girl, who will be making an appearance that will hopefully shock people. And there'll be some cover art inspired by Supergirl, a Supergirl comic.
That one was that was a really dope concept too. And then, I do have a question about that here in a few minutes. So as for the Kickstarter, what kind of rewards can people back in the book expect? I know you said you had several different tiers.
Oh yeah, I have, you know, not only do I have tiers where you can get different covers, you can also get my other books. You know, I have, you know, 3 other comic books I've done. Shark of War, in fact, goes all the way to issue 8 is available. And it's also got a hardcover compilation. The Vicious Vixens now has 3 issues out. Well, the 3rd issue just came out. It's at the printers, but the digital copy's already gone out to people. And then I have a horror one shot called The Cthulhu Man for people who like horror.
My podcast is littered with hundreds of people that are in love with horror books, so that's probably something they'd definitely be interested in.
Yeah, so people can, there are tiers where people, and add-ons where people can get all my other books too, and I try to set those at really reasonable prices. I mean, if you look at my per copy price for those, I think I'm competitive actually with Marvel if you buy the whole bundle, simply because I want people to get all my books. So I kind of price them as low as I think I possibly can.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is there will be a back, you know, normally my biggest tiers are these be in the book tiers where people get to be thugs or
that's kind of dope. I've seen other Kickstarters do that as well. And
Shark of War and Vicious Vixens, you know, my best selling tiers are this: you get to be a thug in the book, you know, who's, you know, gets killed off or something like that in a violent way. And those sell well, but on the problem with Samson is I'm not going to make anybody a Nazi. So I only have a couple of be in the book tiers here, and they're more like cameo appearances. Like there's one who's a reporter for a television reporter, and then there's a couple other minor cameos like a judge and at the trial who can be in the book. So unlike I won't have any for those really high value tiers where I could make. That's why I need to get a lot of people to back. Because I'm going to be having to make it more on volume than having a few angel backers paying $500 to
be in the book
for an extended appearance in the book. Last issue of Shark of War, we had one backer who backed at a high amount so she could be a lab assistant to the evil scientist and get killed when by the monstrous creatures the evil scientist is creating. But that's an over the top evil scientist, and these are Nazis, so I'm not going to make anybody a Nazi. I don't think that would be right at all. And I'm also not going to make anybody a Holocaust victim in the book. So the tiers.
You got limited choices on this one.
Yeah, so it's really going to rely on people just wanting to read the story and be part of it.
I think you nailed that story to a point where I don't think that's going to really be an issue, especially if they take the 10 minutes out of their day to read issue 1. I think that's
oh, thank you.
That's a good selling point on it. So, so how many volumes do you envision, or how many issues do you envision Samson being before you decide, okay, I think I've run my course with Samson? Because this is really a character that could keep going if you wanted it to.
My storyline currently has 6 or 7 issues, and then I was considering doing something, a spin-off book that would be a team book set in that universe. The team he's on is mentioned in issue 2, or he was on is mentioned in issue 2, and I want to kind of as part of that, we would time jump more to closer to the present day, because like I said, this story is kind of an epic that runs from World War II to the end of the Cold War in 1990, early 1990s, and I kind of at some point you got to get I'd want to get up more to a more closer to the current day. Obviously the universe doesn't have to align perfectly between these things, and they'll probably be playing around with time.
That's the great thing about a comic book, right? You can play with time.
But I kind of view this world as not totally a mirror of our own, but you want to have it. I'm always the believer that a comic book universe should be exact duplicate of our world once the superheroes start really taking off, because that's one of the things I always thought interesting about Marvel. If we lived in the Marvel universe, we presumably the technology level would be way above what we're living with now, and it'd be a much different world. When you see some of that with the Watchmen and books like that, where they actually look at that. Whereas
you look at DC, and we got all the different Earths in DC, and there's a new Earth popping up. Geez, like once or twice a year, I guess.
Yeah. But, I think Planetary also. I don't know if you read Warren Ellis's Planetary. He kind of looked at that.
I didn't know.
Well, the irony there was he had a Fantastic Four knockoff in Planetary, and they were bad guys though, who were and the point he was making was they were hogging all this technology they had and not sharing it with the rest of us. And you can kind of see he's making a similar critique of the actual Marvel Fantastic Four, because they have all this fantastic technology, and the rest of us don't have fantastic cars and unlimited energy and stuff like that. And they kind of always hand wave it off by saying, oh, it's really expensive, or we can only make it in tiny quantities. But
that's what we need. That I've thought about that before. I'm like, we don't have enough like bad guy comic books where the villain is kind of like the star of the book. Now we get one shots here and there of a book about a villain. I think Batman DC is getting ready to do a series on the bad guys
Yeah.
where they're getting like their own little individual runs of books just about them, which I think is a really dope concept. But there's just no comic book out there that I can think of off the top of my head that's just a book about a bad guy. Now we got some anti-heroes like Deadpool and Lobo and that kind of stuff, but nothing that's like the villain causing chaos.
Yeah.
So there's nothing like that. And to me, that would be something that would be really cool.
The ones I can think of, if you read some of Mark Waid's non-Marvel work, he did I think it was Mark Waid. He did like Irredeemable, about like a Superman kind of guy who was, who went nuts and started, wiping people out. That was kind of one, though a lot of the focus on that one was on the people trying to stop him, but he was still the probably the main character. If you've read Injustice, I guess the biggest thing would be Injustice.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really good for like the first 2 seasons, and then I kind of went off the rails when he became too evil. He was like he was the right amount of evil at the start, and then he just kind of went and became
No, I enjoyed I didn't enjoy
the
the comic book so much, but I did enjoy the fact that the video games they made based off of Injustice were really. It was the comic books and video game format. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I did play the video games. I loved them. I played both of them when they came out. And I enjoyed the hell out of those because the story was just so good. And they were able to play with the story a little bit from the comic book, but I really enjoyed the way they did the games more so than the comic books themselves. Right. But no, you're right about Injustice. That's a good one. But so let's talk about the covers. Like I did put, you sent me the like, hey, the covers. But let's talk about it. So you got a Supergirl homage coming, and then you got 2 other covers inspired by both Jack Kirby and Frank Quietly.
Right.
So who come up with the concepts to kind of use those 3 particular ones, or was that something like your cover artist said, hey, what do you think about these homages?
The artist wanted to really do a Kirby style cover, and I really wanted to have a cover showing, the Uber Kong, the Uber Kong young Samson throw up. So that's kind of where it came there. So that's kind of what that cover how that cover came out. For the other cover, I basically went and looked at some different Supergirl covers with Supergirl on them, and and
there's plenty of them out there.
I found it. Well, I wanted ones with both Supergirl and Superman, and I wanted ones that looked good. And there's some that look better than others, and I came up with 3 or 4, and he kind of liked that. The one we chose as being the best one to do a cover homage on. And then for the Quietly cover, I wanted one that focused on her. And he suggested kind of something inspired by that cover with, and it's actually the Quietly covers from that what's the name of the series now, the Superman series that he did with was it Grant Morrison?
I know. Yeah,
and it's actually him and it's Superman and Superwoman when Lois gets powers here. And the relationship.
I know exactly what run you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
The relationship between Samson and the Omega Girl is not like either Supergirl or his relationship with either Supergirl or Lois Lane. It's something quite different that will be explained in issue 2. But I think it'll be a very interesting and poignant part of the story.
While we're talking about the art of this book, go ahead and who's doing your covers and who's doing your interiors for you?
Nico, right now Nico Turan's doing everything. He's been my Vicious Vixens artist, so he's probably the artist I've worked with the most, and I really liked his work. And we have the artists I've worked with, him and my Shark of War artist, Harshstroke. I've had the best interaction with in terms of working together, and which is why I wanted to use him for this issue. He's very easy to work with. He's also, to be honest, affordable. I think he gives me a much better rate than he should actually, because I hope he doesn't watch this. Fortunately, he's in England. Probably won't see it, but I
got friends in England that watch it, so who knows?
He gives me a much better rate than he probably should, which helps cover my costs, and he's fast too, which gets these projects done in time. I'd say he's probably my quickest artist as well in terms of turnaround. So that I pride myself on always getting my books out ahead of schedule. It's my 14th book, so I plan on getting this.
That's a lot of books for somebody who runs Kickstarter campaigns.
Yeah, and so I do. Every year I try and do. I hope to do 4 or 5. I wind up doing 3 or so. And
hey, that's still a book a quarter almost. And, so that's still really, really good considering that I've seen some campaigns, take a year to produce.
Right. Yeah, so, I understand that people have been burned on Kickstarters before, and I really want people not to feel that way about any of mine, which is why I was proud to get a creator we love kind of badge from Kickstarter, because enough people were, I guess, thumbs up on my campaign.
Yeah, and people don't realize that those little small things like that really impact what you do on Kickstarter. Because I've seen artists also kicked off a Kickstarter for not meeting what they promised. So getting that little badge is like, it's an easy thing to get, but if the people aren't saying like, hey, I love this book, and giving you that thumbs up on there, it really does impact you.
Yeah, it helps to have that a good reputation, because you're relying on as a percent of backers, the people who backed me before, who backing me this time, are probably 50 to 60, maybe 70% are the people who are backers who backed me in the past, not new backers, which is what I'm always trying to find.
That's what you're here to do, though.
Bring in new backers. It's really hard, though. I mean, it's gotten harder, I think. I don't know if there's something changing about the overall economy or just the state of Kickstarter.
I think that's the biggest play in it, and right now is what's going on with the economy and less expendable income for people who would normally be buying comic books.
Right.
But, which I hate to see that,
Yeah, I do too. And I think, so you always got to try. I always lose some people who backed in the past, and, I don't get 100% return by any stretch of the imagination. But
but if you're getting a good, if you're getting like a 50 to 60 to 70% return from backers, that says a lot about you and what you put out to the public. So
I hope so, and I hope people will, new people will check it out, and that's always, like I said, the hard thing too is, the hard thing about being an indie creator is your reach, it's always so limited. You've got a very small view, where when somebody with a name like Keanu Reeves or Brandon Sanderson puts out a book on Kickstarter, they're going to go.
I think that's how Berserker actually started.
Huh?
I think that's how Berserker started.
Yeah. That's what I meant. I was referring to Berserker. He obviously once he puts the book out, once he puts that book out on Kickstarter, everybody's going to hear about it. People who aren't in the Kickstarter ecosystem are going to hear about it, and they're going to go.
And that's the thing. You gotta. Like for me, I've had to go into Kickstarter, and the way I've done it is I kind of like when you're selecting interest and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You really have to be on top of it, and you really have to be following the social medias to really know when Kickstarters are coming up. And what I've kind of like, you reached out to me to say, hey, can I come on the podcast and talk about my new book? And that's what I want. That's what I'm trying to do here. For comic book creators on Kickstarter, or just comic book creators in general, is like, hey, this is a place where you can come on and we can talk about how you got into this and like what you're trying to achieve with what you're trying to do on Kickstarter.
Right.
And to me, like, I feel like I'm doing something right when artists are reaching out to me and going, hey, can I come on the USDN podcast and talk about my new Kickstarter campaign? And the answer is almost always yes. Like, the only thing I ever asked is like, if like communicate with me, let me know what's going on. I've had several people reach out and just like, hey, I would love to come on and talk about a project I got. I'm like, cool. What's your dates look like? I'm open. My daughter's in college. And literally I have no holdups. I can do this at any point, at any given day, unless I'm outside mowing the lawn, so I literally just say, hey, tell me when you want to come on and I can make that happen, because I work my 9 to 5. I come home and I work on podcast stuff. So for me, it's like, just say when, and we can make this happen at any time. And I try to tell people that when they initially email me, is like, and I think I did the same for you. I'm like, hey, what's your availability? Let's knock it out.
Yeah, I'm retired from my day jobs now, so
I've retired from one day job already. I'm on number 2.
This is I'm mostly focused on this, and others, life. My kids are out of college, and they're on their own for the most part, and so I can do this. I'm available when anybody ever wants to talk to me about my comics. I'm available probably 24/7.
That's
I've got an Australian podcast I'm going on in a couple of weeks, I think, and we were working out the time difference about when I would be on and when he would be on. And
Bruno Catarino is in England.
Yeah.
And I've interviewed him twice for both his last 2 Kickstarter programs.
Familiar.
He's Cinematic Figments and Bereavement were the 2 that I've interviewed him for. Right. And like anytime he gets ready to launch a new book, the first thing he does is like, hey, Chairman, when can I come on and talk about this book? I'm like, Bruno, you know the rules, dude. Just give me a time and a day and we'll make it happen. And for us, that's why I like this 10 a.m. on a Saturday time slot. Because it worked out for him. I'm like, well, it can probably work out for guys in America too, because we're waking up, we've had our breakfast, we're drinking our coffee, our second cup of coffee in my case.
Yeah, that's my
and that pets are fed, and to me, it's a good time. We may not get viewers, but we will get the listeners later on when he goes live next week. And I just really like that time frame of 10 a.m. on a Saturday for me. And it usually works out for other guests too. Yeah.
I'm not in a rush to leave the house on a Saturday morning. So
I got to move. I'm mowing lawn today. So I mean, for me, it's kind of like I'm just delaying what I got to do in a good way, because this is something that I really enjoy doing is
I'm glad
with artists and doing creators. And see, that helps me out, because I know Bruno, he loves, like, after he's came on, he goes and it's like, hey, if you guys have a project and you want to talk about it, this guy is your guy to go to. And that makes me happy. It puts a smile on my face that, like, I'm that guy for him, and I want to be that guy for others who, as well.
Yeah, that's great. When I started, when I did Shark of War 5 years ago, I found, a number of people to do some reviews. Well, not a number, but a few people to do some reviews, and a lot of those websites are gone now, and they're not doing it still. So having somebody who's lasting and doing this regularly and still doing it.
This is
very helpful.
If this could be my full-time job to where I just get to sit around and review comic books and interview comic creators, man, my day job would be done yesterday. But my passion lies with knowing that people trust me enough to send me their hard work for an honest review. And I had to tell somebody that the other day as well. I'm like, hey, I'm not sure what you're trying to ask me, but usually if you're messaging me, you either have a book ready to be reviewed and you want me to review it for you and have you on the podcast to talk about it, or you're asking me for some type of input, like, hey, check out this book.
Right.
What do you think about it? What could what can I tweak to make it, and that's what I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's honestly the first time that ever happened for me, I cried because that to me was I'm doing something right. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
people are trusting me enough, and I've put myself out there enough to where people are trusting me to do this for them.
Right.
And that's like the highest form of that you can receive, is that people are trusting you to provide them inputs for something that they honestly care about too. And when other people care about it, you care about it just as much as they do, and you want to see it succeed.
Right.
So it's like pouring love into your child and hoping that they come out good because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no, Ben, honestly, anytime you want to come on and talk about a new book, the door is always open, and we can do this anytime you want. Now, before I let you go, if anybody is on the fence about supporting your Kickstarter, what can you say to them now to really drive that point home on it?
Well, I think the biggest selling point is that, I'm offering to, if you're all a fan of comic books, I'm letting you read issue 1 for free, with no obligation. So you don't have to sign up for my emails. You don't have to do anything. You just click the link on the Kickstarter page. If you like the book, I hope it sells itself, and I think issue 2 is going to be even better. If you like issue 1, I think issue 2 is going to be even better, because we're really getting into the heart of the story. We've introduced the main characters, and now we're getting to some of the real action, and we're gonna get to some of the most exciting parts. And for those of you who want to see some Nazi punching, which some people have been like, oh, I'm excited to see some Nazi punching. Issue 2 gets into the Nazi punching, where you don't get
that's.
Yeah, you don't get as much of that in issue 1, because we're he's being experimented on and stuff like that. But we're going to get to see some of that in issue, a fair amount of that in issue 2, and issue 3 as the story evolves along in his involvement in World War II. I mean, we get a brief moment where in issue 1 where you see him with the French Resistance, because there's some time skip there where he's telling a story of his time with the French Resistance when he first met.
You do time skips really well.
Oh, thank you.
I really enjoyed the way you did it in issue 1 with the time jumps you did. They were smooth, and they made sense. And that's something that I think is hard for some people to really do, is do a time jump backwards and then back to forwards. Right. That's a concept to me that you really have to put a lot of brain cells into to get that just right. And you did that in issue 1. So I will say, if anybody out there is listening later on, the guy knows how to do a time jump the proper way in his book. So prepare yourself, because they are a really great thing. He does them very well, and they make sense the way he does them. So.
Did we freeze?
What's that? No. You're good.
For a second.
No. Oh, okay. Yeah. That was on your end then.
Okay.
Which it happens. My whole thing's frozen before. I've had to drop out of a live podcast and then bring myself back into it.
Yeah.
So, but Ben, that's all I have for you. Why don't you go ahead and plug your social medias and tell everybody where they can find Biting Comics?
Sure. You can find me at bitingcomics.com, just all one word, bitingcomics.com. It'll take you up to the website where you can sign up, and you can get, not only can you get free issue of Samson, you'll get free issue of Shark of War and a free issue of Vicious Vixen. So you can basically try a range of my product, from Shark of the War is really high concept sci-fi action. Vicious Vixens is genre A-Team meets Charlie's Angels action, with some attractive women, if you like attractive women.
Everybody does
involved as well, as you're following their exploits, and of course you'll get to read Samson as well. If you'd like to sign up for my email, I'd appreciate it. I'm on Facebook. I am on Blue Sky and on Twitter, well, X. But I have to admit, most of my posting is on my focus is more on Facebook, which is I'm at Shark of War on Facebook. So if you facebook.com/Shark of War, how I always have trouble knowing how you find stuff on Facebook, but yeah, it's Shark of War on Facebook. That's probably where I post, most of the stuff on my Kickstarter and, other things that I'm doing, though I do post, on Twitter and Blue Sky, but I don't cultivate as much there. I think most of the people I associate are more on Facebook, but yeah, so that's and Ben Lacy 1 on Instagram, B Lacy 1 on I think
Blue Sky
and Blue Sky. Yeah. Actually, I'm trying to look at what I am. Yeah, B Lacy 1 on Blue Sky. That's BLACY 1. I don't have an E in my my last name. A lot of people misspell it LACEY. It's just LACY. But yeah, that's my main things.
All right. Well, Ben, that's all I have for you today. And as always, everybody, you can find me at Blue Sky as USDN Chairman, and on all the other social media platforms as the USDN Podcast. So, but on behalf of myself, the chairman, the new council member, Ben, and the Council of Nerds, everybody, this USDN interview has been USDN approved. With that, everybody enjoy Free Comic Book Day. Go out and enjoy it. It's a beautiful weekend.
It's a trap!